Alright guys, so should the Olympic Games be held in one permanent venue? I'm going to argue for a yes on that. The main reason has to do with cost. So you probably already know that to host the Olympic Games, it costs a huge amount of money. And for the most part throughout the history of the modern Olympics, cities have ran at huge losses, and I'm going to go through some of these losses. Now there was a golden era where there was some cities that made a profit. We'll talk about that as well. So this paragraph down here just gives an overview here that the average cost since 1960 for the Summer Games is 5.2 billion US dollars, 3.1 billion for the Winter Games. The most expensive games ever were the Winter Games in Sochi, Russia in 2014, 51 billion US dollars. A crazy amount of money. The 1976 games here, I have it highlighted, in Montreal had the highest cost overrun for Summer Games and for any games at 720%, more than 7 times over budget. Crazy. London in 2012 had a cost overrun of 76%, which is still, that's close to double the estimated cost. Now this paragraph in green, there's a reason why I highlighted in green, because this is one of the successes. Los Angeles 84, they strictly control expenses for the 84 games by using existing facilities that were paid for by corporate sponsors. So LA, they had 2 strategies here that worked really well. They already had existing facilities and they were paid for by corporate sponsors. So corporate sponsors paying for a lot of the cost of hosting the event. And as a result, the 84 games made a profit for Los Angeles, and they used the money to set up a foundation, and that money was used to promote youth sports in California, educate coaches, and maintain a library. So all in all, 84 was a huge success financially, and that actually triggered a kind of a golden age of games. So here's a table here showing all the games since 1896, first modern Olympics held in Athens. And here it just goes through the operating budget, total cost, taxpayer contribution, profit and loss, the year the debt was paid, and some notes. So all of these here, a couple of these allegedly made profits, but we're not sure about that. A small profit here in 1948 for London. Here's the 1976 catastrophe games in Montreal. They made a huge loss, and they even introduced a special tobacco tax in 1976 to fund the loss. And look at this, 2006. This was the year they finally paid off the cost. It took them 30 years from 1976 to 2006 to pay it off. A disaster. Okay, so the 1984 games, the first Summer Olympics to make a profit since 1932. The Seoul Olympics in 88 made a huge profit here of 300 million. Is that correct? Who knows? But officially that's the number, and it was a record profit. Barcelona, again, they made a profit as well of 10 million. Again, in 1996, the Olympics were held in the US, this time in Atlanta, and they followed the 1984 model from LA. Not surprisingly, because it was so successful, and again, they made a profit. But we go to the turn of the millennium, 2000 Sydney, and look at this, a loss of 2 billion. 2.1 billion. The 2004 games in Athens made a loss, and apparently it was so bad in Athens that it contributed to the Greek government debt crisis that happened a few years after that. And look at this, 21 out of 22 venues are unused. So all in all, a disaster. The Beijing Olympics in 2008 officially made a profit, but this is a Chinese number, so you can't trust that. Now, talking about not trusting, now the London Games broke even. Look at this, nil. And this is due to the way they financed it and the way they did the numbers here. So this is crafty accounting here, claiming that it broke even when it didn't. It made a huge loss. And the Sochi Games, 53 million profit from a 51 billion games. Absolutely not. Terrible numbers here. You can't trust the Russians, you can't trust Chinese, and you can't trust crafty English accountants. The Rio Games, they're more honest. They made a loss of 2 billion, similar to Sydney. And honestly, I think the ones in between probably made similar losses. They're messing around with the numbers here. So let's look at this article here. The biggest threat to the future of the Olympics. This is an article in The Guardian written by Andy Bull. And he's asking the question, does anyone really want to host the games anymore? And it's a good question, and this was written in 2016, so this one is a fairly old article now. It has some important information, especially in this paragraph, because it goes through the 2022 Winter Olympics. So there were 9 cities bidding for these 2022 Winter Olympic Games. Oslo was a city that bid for it. They pulled out because of little public support. Stockholm withdrew for similar reasons. Krakow in Poland also cancelled. They did a poll of residents, 70% opposed. Munich, Davos, Barcelona, Quebec, they all dropped their bids. And so from the 9 candidates, the IOC was left with 2 potential hosts, Almaty in the dictatorship of Kazakhstan, and the other was Beijing, which he doesn't mention is also a dictatorship, the People's Republic of China. Now, I wonder why he didn't mention China's dictatorship. Maybe a subject for another video. But Beijing won the bid. Most of the events are going to be held 140 miles away from Beijing in Changli. So it's not really going to be Beijing that hosts it. Officially, that's going to be the host city. This one goes through the 2024 bid. I'm going to give you updated information on this, but just to let you know that in 2015, Boston actually was interested, and then Boston withdrew because of low public support. So I'm going to reveal what actually happened with the 2024 bid. It was awarded to Paris. 5 cities submitted their candidature, but Hamburg, Rome, and Budapest withdrew, and that left Paris and Los Angeles. So Paris won the bid, and unfortunately, poor Los Angeles lost out. But as we're about to find out, it wasn't all doom and gloom for Los Angeles, because look at this. Following the decision to award 2 games simultaneously, Paris was understood as the preferred host for 2024. And on July 2017, the IOC announced Los Angeles as the sole candidate for 2028, enabling Paris to be confirmed as 2024. And LA, they lost the 2024 bid, but look, they were designated as the host for 2028 with no other cities bidding for it. So there you go. LA didn't lose. Paris and LA both won, essentially. And here is the article from the Olympics website. You can see their logos. And here we have, this I believe is Thomas Bach, the president of the IOC. He's got 2 hands, so why not give it to 2 cities at the same time? In his right hand, he's got Paris, and in his left hand, he's got LA. Everyone's a winner. And it wasn't just these 2 Olympic Games, because as we're about to see, they've already announced the 2032 host, and it's going to be Brisbane, Australia. And once again, look at this. Without any rival bid, Brisbane was confirmed as host for the 2032 Summer Olympics. So we have 3 Olympic Games in a row, 3 Summer Games, 24 Paris, 28 LA, and 32 Brisbane, which essentially there were no rival bids. I mean, technically 24 had, but as we saw, the other rival was just given the next games 4 years from then. Unbelievable. So nobody wants to host this anymore. Now I will point out that there was some cities that were interested. You had Ahmedabad in India, Jakarta, Doha, and Madrid, Rhine-Ruhr. So they were going to, this is interesting, they were going to host it in 13 different cities. So this region in Germany was going to spread it out over a number of cities. And also China had a couple of multi-city bids. And again, Italy had like a north-central Italian bid. And again, Rotterdam, Amsterdam. So this is opening the possibility of having multiple cities hosting it. So London, possible co-bid with Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, and so a whole bunch of cities, Portland. So this is something we might see in the future. Look at this. Despite their catastrophe in 76, Montreal was thinking of doing a co-bid with Toronto. You know, you had a whole bunch of cities and regions here, but at the end of the day, none of these actually went forward with an official bid. And it was just Brisbane, Australia. They were the only ones dumb enough to go for this. And hey, if you're the only person in the competition, you win the first prize. Let's see what happens. Are these cities going to make a profit? Who knows? Paris hosted it before. LA hosted it before, and of course LA, they had the very successful 84 games, so maybe they can turn over a profit again. We'll have to wait and see. But I think hosting it in one city, a permanent venue, would get rid of all these crazy costs. And that's why I want to go back to Athens, Greece, because as we know, the ancient Olympic Games took place in Greece. And the first modern games took place in Athens, Greece. So Greece would be kind of the romantic home of the Olympics. It is the actual home. And for the romantic people, they might want to have a permanent venue in Greece. And one of the obvious places would be Athens. It's the capital of Greece, by far the biggest city. They hosted the Olympics in 2004, not that long ago. And this article here claims that the Olympic Games was a bust. The games were successful in terms of, how the event went. But in terms of money, 14 to 15 billion in debt. It was estimated that it cost 50,000 euros per Greek household. So it cost a crazy amount of money. So when you look at this figure here, this is nonsense. 14 million loss. It doesn't take into account everything that was involved. So this is probably more accurate. So it cost a huge amount of money, but these infrastructures, these buildings are already there. So to host it again shouldn't cost that much. So that's why Athens, Greece would be a possible venue for a permanent Olympic Games. Now this guy here, Derek Boussy represented Great Britain. Now he came up in a day, so he was a triple jump athlete for Great Britain in the Mexico City Olympics in 1968. And he was also the chief administrator of operations for the 1982 Commonwealth Games. So he has experience. He was a former athlete, and he also the chief administrator of the 82 Commonwealth Games. So he's held many other roles in sports across the world. So this guy has credentials, and his idea is a proposed permanent home for the modern Olympics. And like me, he's looking towards Greece because he's a romantic like I am. But he's not looking at Athens. He's looking at the original ancient Olympic Games venue, which was Olympia, which of course is where the Olympics gets its name from. So Olympia is situated in northwest of Peloponnese. It's a peninsula in southern Greece. So let's have a look at where it is on a map. So here's Greece. I'm going to zoom in a bit here. So this is the Peloponnese Peninsula. This is where Athens is. And let's zoom in a bit more. And here is where he's talking about. This is where the ancient Olympics took place. Archaea Olympia. So it's kind of far away from Athens. It's not close at all. And this is a pretty sparsely populated area of the country. Now this peninsula has a population of about 1 million. Let's go back to his article here. Just over 1 million inhabitants, 21,000 square meters. Now, I think this is meant to be kilometers. So we're talking about maybe 14,000 square miles. So it's a pretty large region here. The biggest city in the peninsula is Patras. It has a population of 167,000, and it's in this region of Western Greece. So the Olympic venue is roughly around here, and it's part of this Peloponnese Peninsula, and then this part here is part of this region called Western Greece. And this part of Greece only has a population of about 679,000 inhabitants. Let's look at this map here. So this peninsula only has about 1 million people. This is the ancient site of Olympia. It's pretty far away from Athens. So he's basically talking about building it from like a green field site, basically. So this is kind of like in the middle of nowhere, and he's talking about building a whole venue from scratch, which would cost an absolute fortune, but this would be the permanent venue. So you'd only have massive costs up front the one time. So then he comes up with this idea of having a theme host. And so he uses the example here of India. So his idea here is that India would get involved in hosting or being a theme host for the Olympics, even though it's happening in Greece in Olympia. And India, they're the designated theme host. So they'll be responsible for the opening and closing ceremony. They would design the medals and so on. So it's kind of a cute idea. I don't know if that's a good idea. I mean, it's okay. I kind of like it. And then he's talking about lighting the torch in Olympia, flying it to India, bringing it around India before flying it back to Greece, and then having the torch go through Greece back to Olympia. So it's kind of a nice symbolic idea. But I think this is where the idea really comes good, because the Olympics are obviously every 4 years. So what about the other like 3.5 years? The Games Village would convert to an Olympic university for international staff and students. This is probably more important than the games itself, because now he's come up with a solution to like, what are you going to do for the other time? And he's come up with actually having a university, that this whole campus is going to be university. The Olympic Village will be like village for students to live in apartments while they attend the university. This is where I think this idea really stands out, because it'd be one thing to like come up with the money to build it, but it would be such a waste just to have it sitting there for most of the time and then only have it used for a few weeks every 4 years. And so the idea of building an Olympic university, I think is a great idea. And he's talking about selling apartments to the general public and then have these owners renting it out to media people while the Olympics take place. I mean, that could work. Or just have the whole thing as a university most of the time, and then just for the Olympics, just convert it to an Olympics Village, kick the students out, and then bring in your Olympic athletes. Turn this university into like a super prestigious, like modern university that'll be like a modern day Harvard or Yale or Oxford or Cambridge, where you bring in people from all over the world, have like really prestigious departments, especially like sports departments, science departments, whatever. So I really like this idea. My only concern is the location and the fact that it's in the middle of nowhere. Would it make more sense to have it in Athens? I don't know. But I like this guy's idea. I like the romance of it. What do you guys think? What do you think of the Olympics in general? Do you think people are just wary of the games? What do you think of the money being spent? And I mean, it doesn't look good. All these potential cities just withdrawing their bids. Let us know what you think about the idea of a permanent venue. Till next time, I'll see you guys later.